Oh, I want to give a shout out straight back to Susan. I know that she's been putting in a lot of work, and I've never been to the Queen Mary before. So as I stepped onto this big esteemed ship, I was thinking how cool it is that she's putting on a cannabis event here. So let's give Susan a huge round of applause. All right, so welcome to our pro athletes and cannabis panel. And really this panel is about, man, my P's are pushing, so I'll move back a little. So this is also for anybody that's an athlete, whether you're 80 years old and you go for a walk in the evening, like if you're a runner, you like to swim, whatever, anybody can use cannabis within athletics. So we're quite lucky to have these high-end professional athletes up here with us, but at the end of the day, this information translates to everybody in the room. So I always like to analogize that we've got these top pros, but I'll be the average Joe up here, and all of you can listen from my perspective as well. And I also really call this panel Marijuana Rebranded. It's really, I think, since the year 2000 when Y2K, the world didn't end, everybody kind of started to doubt certain things, and people collectively, I think, woke up conscious-wise in America to the fact we were being lied to about cannabis. That's when the culture shift, really to me, 2000 happened. And now, 18 years later, it's a beautiful place to see where we are today. The true rebrand, really, marijuana was a drug. It was bad for you. Bad people used it. It made you lazy, made you stupid. And even the word itself, marijuana, I'm sure most of us know the connotations behind the word were not positive. So now cannabis is a medicine, and cannabis is used for wellness and to help people and to fix seizures, and enlightened people use cannabis. So on that note, on the light of enlightenment, I'm going to start off by letting our panelists, starting with Al here, introduce themselves instead of me doing that. And just, I guess the way I'd love for you to introduce yourself is tell us who you are, and then tell us really, ultimately, the most important part, why you're here today.
Hello.
Thanks, man. Well, how you doing? My name is Al Harrington, former NBA player. I played 17 years professional basketball from Orange, New Jersey. Now reside here in Los Angeles. I live on vacation. I love it here. But you know, what I'm doing here today, obviously, is just to continue to raise awareness about the unbelievable benefits of cannabis. And you know, quick on my story, you know, I told you I grew up in Jersey, so you know, the war on drugs was really real when you know, where I grew up. I either seen people getting locked up, or I was always taught to believe that cannabis or marijuana at the time, or reefer, is like how I was, you know, how people used to talk about it where I'm from, was a gateway drug. So, you know, throughout my whole life, you know, and especially, you know, me going, you know, to the NBA out of high school, I was always afraid of cannabis. And when I got in the NBA, that was the first time that I saw actually, like, you know, top-notch players actually using cannabis, but at the time I still didn't understand it. It still didn't make sense to me. And I looked down on my teammates that used cannabis. But in 2011, my grandmother had come to see me play when I was playing for the Denver Nuggets. And, you know, Denver's obviously one of the first markets to, you know, have a medical program. And she suffered from glaucoma. And, you know, glaucoma was always the first, you know, thing that cannabis was, you know, that actually healed, was something that it considered to heal. So I was able to convince her to try cannabis, and it was hard because, you know, she was the main person growing up telling us that, you know, weed was a gateway drug. And when I was able to get her to try it, you know, I checked on her an hour and a half later, and when I went downstairs, she was downstairs reading her Bible. And, you know, when I asked her how she was doing, she said, "I'm healed." She said, "It's the first time I've been able to read my Bible in over 3.5 years." And for me, that correlation was just crazy that, you know, from someone like her, and I always say, like, if my grandmother's not going to heaven, we're all going to hell. And, you know, for the first thing that she would do would actually go down and read her Bible, you know, it just spoke volumes to me. And at that point, I started to educate myself. The end of that season, I actually had a knee surgery and got a staph infection. And I was in the hospital for, you know, 10 days. I had, you know, 4 surgeries in a week. And at some point, I thought I was going to die. But when I was sitting in there, you know, obviously I'm taking all this pain medication. And this lady that I had knew in Colorado came to see me, and she introduced me to CBD. And she gave me all these topicals. She gave me tinctures, capsules. And, ever since that day, I haven't taken an aspirin, I haven't taken an Advil, I haven't taken any pharmaceutical drugs to manage my pain away from the game. And, pretty much that's my story, and that's why I'm here.
Hello. Al's story is great, and Jim's and everybody's up here. And I think the reason I'm in cannabis is because I ask a lot of questions and do a lot of listening. And if you do that, you can hear countless stories of lives this changes. My name is Matt Nordgren. I run a fund called ARCADIAN. We do a lot of investing in the industry. I've been doing that for years. Have been very successful at it. Also was a former athlete. Somewhere probably in between Jim and Al. I was a backup quarterback my whole career. So a little bit of an average Joe that was around a lot of high-level athletes. And so, didn't have to use a lot of it for pain, but was around a lot of guys that did for a long time and really saw a lot of benefit that it did give a lot of athletes. I used it as well in my own personal story. My grandmother had Alzheimer's. We were able to help her quality of life at the end of her life. Had a couple of cousins with cancer, was able to increase their life, have quality of their life at the end of their life. All three have passed. And so not just hearing other people's stories, but you end up experiencing some of your own. And I think these are the types of things that make this industry work. So we got into it. It has been one heck of an economic benefit, that's for sure. But it feels really good to be in an industry that you can do good business and feel good about the business that you're doing every day.
Hello. Oh, there we go. Hi. Hi, everyone. My name is Eliza Maroney. I am the co-founder of Lucky Box Club, a cannabis subscription service here in California. Yes, we actually do deliver actual products to your doorstep. And I'm also known as the Cannabis Yogi. So I've launched a brand that infuses yoga classes with cannabis in various different ways. Every attendee receives a Lucky Box, one of our boxes, and they get to learn about new brands and products in the process before, during, and after their classes. It gives people a really warm, intimate space to experiment with new products and to learn about the different ways of using cannabis and CBD as well. We have CBD-only boxes. And I am in this because I, just like everyone else, I think in this room, have been profoundly moved by this amazing, incredible plant in many different ways. So my history does stem back to being a cultivator and going from cultivation into retail and really understanding the entire plant process, and I'm really proud of that. I am not a professional athlete. I'm the only one on this stage right now, but I do have a lot of insight in how cannabis can enhance performance, and it can also help people to heal after post-workout and games, I would imagine. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Nick Moody. I actually recently just retired from the NFL, primarily that's why I'm here, to focus on this industry. I played for the 49ers, that's who drafted me, kind of my introduction to the industry firsthand.
The Niners.
And then the Seahawks and the Redskins. So we got a company started a couple years ago initially, my dad and a couple partners. So now we're translating, I'm tripping right now, sorry. No, we're switching over from a grow to a manufacturing facility. So that's what our primary focus is right now. And the reason I'm really big on marijuana is just not just me, it's my family. We, as a whole, we believe in the benefits of it, not just physically, but for your mental well-being. And with my history in football, I played linebacker and free safety at Florida State and then in the league. So I've had plenty of injuries, dislocated shoulders, broken bones, concussions, disc issues, arthritis. So I've had pretty much just about anything you can imagine. So my thing is the benefits of just the plan itself, them wanting to restrict us from being able to use it and prescribe us opiates, that's a big contradiction, in my opinion. And that's what I'm kind of getting into more so now, is the advocacy for that, and that and the wellness and the THC and the CBD as well. So that's why I'm here.
I'm no Gary Vee, but I occasionally swear, just a warning. And I wanted to say it must feel fucking good to be able to come out of the closet of cannabis and not have the NFL breathing down your neck.
That was huge because personally, from my experience, I was a guy that was actually in the drug program. So I got put in there for 2 years, and I put in there. Well, I failed the test, and then I was placed in there. So that comes along with, I was tested twice a week, every week, so up to 8 times a month. They would come 6 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, Saturday mornings, ask you where you are. You got to give them a log of your travel. So I actually had family members and friends that have actually been on probation. They had less restrictions than I did. But just being in that process and seeing other guys go through that process, and then just that you actually kind of really realize how much cannabis does help you in terms of your injury and then the stress and like dealing with the stress of being a pro athlete, the family demands and all that stuff. And then when you have that taken from you, when you're somebody that actually relies on that, you don't even realize you rely on it, but it does really help you, then you kind of see like the negative outcome of that. Sometimes you'll be in certain situations where you wouldn't even have been in that if you were allowed to still be able to use cannabis. I've seen different guys get into situations when they're in the drug program where they started doing things they would never normally do. And they were just like completely different people. And honestly, I think that with the NFL program, they kind of do more detriment than they do good when they restrict us and then try to tell you what to do. And this is how you need to act, and you got to follow these rules, and you can't act like everybody else, even though you're a normal person, but you got to act this certain way. Meanwhile, some of the guys that give writing the checks, they do some of the wildest stuff you could imagine.
No, you guys ever watch Ballers before?
I live in Miami, so that show is pretty accurate.
Awesome. Well, no, I agree with you too, man. And really, that makes a poignant point. When you are caught using cannabis, you're almost then put over a threshold to have to take opiates for pain because you can't use a natural remedy. There's a friend of mine named Marvin Washington that played as well, and I think he's in the process of filing some form of lawsuit, against the NFL for forced addiction when they don't give you a solution. And yeah, it really does. It sadly pushes you guys when you have no other option. Pills are the only thing to do when you're playing that hard and being hurt. So, cheers to you and congrats on retirement. Okay, so quickly I'll go over what I do in the athletics and cannabis field very quickly. I put on an athletic tour around the country, somewhat like Tough Mudder or Spartan Race called the 420 Games. We compete, we do yoga, 4.20 mile runs, jiu-jitsu. Big Al coached a 3-on-3 basketball tournament here in Venice last March. And so we go out and we do the opposite of what people think when they hear cannabis. We go be active, we bring our families, our kids, and we don't smoke at the events. And we talk about stuff like this at the events, things like cannabis is an alternative to opiates. I have an edible line called Canna Athlete, and it's an edible product. It's a spray for before you work out for focus, and it's a post-recovery serum. And then lastly, I tried very hard last year to open the world's first cannabis gym with Ricky Williams. It was called Power Plant Fitness. It's a venture on the shelf that we hope to eventually bring into fruition, where the trainers understand how to use cannabis and help you, figure out if it is or it isn't for you. And that's an important point I want to touch on. I don't think cannabis well, actually, I'm going to back up. There are really two ways athletes can use cannabis. You can really delineate it in two very defined manners. And one, most people understand is recovery, CBD. You hurt, you smoke, you feel better. And we're going to go into that for sure today on the opiate side of things. But I've always enjoyed it for focus. I've always liked to smoke before I go into the gym, before I swim, before I ski, before I surf. And it gives me something, that's a focus that I don't normally have. It really translates across my life with ADD. Like when I was in college, I smoked to write my term papers, and I just needed it almost for a focus, i.e. a medicine versus to get high. So there's really two ways. Focus, athletes can use it for training or during athletics, or they can use it for recovery. So I wanted to just kind of actually, like Matt, for example, did you ever use cannabis during your career when you were training or during a game?
Yeah, Jim, both of the categories you just mentioned used it for, and so did a lot of the guys. I don't know. I mean, in our sport, I would imagine the numbers have got to be 60% of the players, and probably higher, maybe, huh?
Maybe, I would say like 85.
And in NBA, it's probably, like 95? I mean...
0.9.
Yeah, I mean, it's... either way, it's a significant amount of people that benefit from using this for both of those areas. I did, and I saw a lot of guys do it, Jim.
Anyone else want to chime in on focus, the aspect of using cannabis to get the what I call eye of the tiger?
Me in particular, I like to use it to focus. For me, it's like it takes away the nervousness and the butterflies, so it just kind of makes it feel like you do go out there every day and practice just another day, nothing out of the ordinary. It just makes everything normal, easy.
What I like to liken it to is to everything in life. There's something called flow state. And whether you're an athlete, whether you're a musician, whether you're an artist, having sex, anything, when your mind goes away and your body just becomes one with your mind, that's called flow state. That's why artists have always been kind of let to be that sect that used cannabis and psychedelics, and even the surf community and whatnot. So flow state is something, again, I like to translate this beyond just athletics and why cannabis really, it's good for athletes and fitness, but it correlates across our whole life to allow us to enjoy things like athletics. It makes the things you love, it allows you to love them a little bit more and appreciate them a little bit more. So on the focus side of things, I think we kind of covered it. I think, Al, you've mentioned before you don't like to use cannabis before you train. And I want to hear from Al because I don't think everybody should use cannabis, and it's important to hear from someone who maybe it doesn't affect in the best way before they get in the gym.
Yeah, for me, so I'm an indica smoker. So I like to smoke the heavy stuff so I can go sit down and chill out. So that's the reason why for me, obviously for me to consume right before trying to do anything, especially athletics, is probably not the right thing. Now, most people say, why don't you try sativas? So I've tried sativas, and then sativas make my heart race. So I was in a lose-lose. So that's why I actually choose not to, consume before. But, I don't knock it. I've actually started to be able to kind of control it now, because I use so much. Or I've been using this a lot. So now I actually can smoke indicas and actually get stuff done. I have 4 kids, so I have to medicate before I deal with them. So so I've changed a little bit, Joe, for sure.
Nice, I like that. Flow state parenting.
Another point on that, Jim, and the interesting thing is just being able to figure out what works for you, because the amount of products that are coming to the market now, you can sort of experiment and do just what Al did, and no one person is alike. I mean, our chemical makeup is so different. Our systems work so different that it's just important to continue to figure out what works for you in what environment.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to touch on, and I think, Al, if indicas, are more sleepy and heavy to you, that's a great way that you know yourself, you know what you want in your medicine, and you know when to use it. And to me, the one thing I've liked to try and debunk to as much as I can, we've got Dr. Sue Sisley here in the front row today. Hey, Dr. Sue. Let's give Sue a hand. I might even ask Sue a question right now. But, there's a long myth, in my opinion, that indica means one thing and sativa means the other, meaning that indica's head heavy and it makes you sleepy, and a sativa is an energizing cannabis result. And what Matt just said is truthfully to me what's most important. Everybody, especially, I'm saying this because we're talking about fitness and cannabis, knowing what works for you is way more important than, hey bro, do you have an indica or a sativa? So it's like understanding your body type and then how cannabis works. But, from a science standpoint, the myth has really been shown that indica does not necessarily mean one thing and sativa doesn't. And the easiest way to understand that is 2 people can smoke the same plant and they feel completely opposite. So it's really about knowing yourself, especially within athletics, in terms of what type of cannabis you use and when. What about you?
I'd love to chime in on this one because it's something I love talking about. But it's really interesting to see that it's really not indica sativa anymore. And now that we're learning so much about terpenes and different cannabinoids, and even how our endocannabinoid receptor system works. I mean, there's so much research that has not happened yet, right? Because it has been federally illegal. So this is something that we're just now touching the surface. And it's really important to understand that there are different ways to also apply cannabis to your workout. I mean, it sounds like you should be using topicals. Like, topicals are amazing, and people don't give it enough credit. There's so many ways for your body to benefit from cannabis, as well as tinctures, understanding CBD versus CBN, and how you can use blends and creating your own blend. It really goes deep, and I don't want to go off on a tangent, but just pointing out that there's so much more than just smoking or vaping nowadays, and it's really a blessing that we have all of these options. Even patches I've been seeing lately, you know?
Well, yeah, and what I take from you dialing it right into this is that you really have a lot of options to choose exactly what type of medicine to get you where you want to be. And so, again, I just think it's starting slow is important. And in this room, just a show of hands, I'm interested. Who likes to use cannabis before they go for a run or they do something athletic? So it's about half and half. Very interesting. All right. Well, so cannabis has also been proven to be a neuroprotectant, and that's something I kind of want to touch on and delve into the CBD side of things. We've got big ex-pro athletes that played football here, and then we've got a yogi, and we've got Al who played basketball, where you get banged around pretty darn good. And so we all use CBD in different ways in a recovery facet, but Matt, do you want to talk a little bit about CBD as a neuroprotectant and how like a football player uses CBD both, prior to injury as well as post-traumatic injury?
Yeah, that would be, I'd love to talk about that. In particular, as my father was a pro football player, and as was I grew up around all of these players from the 60s and 70s, so I get to see it at 50, 60, 70 years old, the repercussions. And these guys are in tremendous amounts of pain. Almost none of them aren't in some kind of pain, and head trauma is a lot of it. Maybe we ought to give Dr. Sue more money so she can figure some of these things out. But, we to see my generation now see the past generation's downfall, and you've seen the movies. I mean, it's a really important topic for us all to think about. CBD is a great way to do it, a non-psychoactive molecule. You can derive it from hemp or cannabis. And with Mitch McConnell's efforts, we're about to have hemp legal federally, thank God, we think very soon. So it's going to be tough for the NFL to not recognize that in other sports. But I think that there's a lot of different types of CBD, as she talked about. You kind of have to figure out which one's good for you. There's some great brands we can suggest. I think as a neuroprotector, I'd see guys using it literally 10 minutes before game time. And it's because CBD doesn't take away from their ability to use their minds as much as THC might. So I've seen that, but I've also seen, Jim, a lot of guys using it on Mondays, day after games, to do more of the rehabilitation efforts. And I think rather than being pumped full of all these medicines that they would prefer to give you, which I know you can talk about, and Dr. Sue and Mike James, who's got some great stories out there, can tell you about. And playing football, I can't tell you how many of these minor concussions you get. I mean, every time you get hit, you just assume like you shake it off, but they're little concussions, and we've all had the real ones. I mean, they knock you. Lights out's a real thing. And so if CBD can be helpful in these efforts, it's something we all need to consider.
I think CBD is really important when it comes to the neuro stuff, because Mike is a good friend of mine. We actually train and do rehab down in the same place in Miami. So I've seen firsthand like him recovering from the concussions and having to wear the glasses. And I've had a couple of concussions myself, and I've had concussions that I know weren't documented, but I definitely had over 10. So sometimes every now and then I'll get like little headaches in the front of my head. Well, I know when I take my sublingual CBD and things like that, the pressure will go away, or like any like anxiety and stuff like that. Things from all the head trauma and contact, it helps with the relief of that a lot. Yeah. And I hear that from a lot of guys now. So that's more and more people are kind of reaching out, trying to find out more and more about CBD and see how they can get their hands on it now to treat their symptoms.
Al, you're quite the entrepreneur, and I've admired your rise in the industry with your brands and Viola and everything else. So when we talk about CBD, something I think as an athlete, and again, translating across the board, but especially for recovery, there's something called whole plant medicine. And you can take CBD. CBD's become a buzzword in the general public, and half the time, like quite honestly, it's like when you buy organic food, I wonder, like, is this really organic, or did they just put that on the box? So it's really important important, like with all of your food in life, food is medicine, is how I'm gonna end this today. Know where your medicine comes from. Just because something says CBD doesn't mean it's good for you, and it doesn't even mean there's CBD in it. So know where you're getting your medicine. And people like Al, who are doing it the right way, tested. Whole plant medicine is an option where people, you don't have to take THC, but when you ratio it with THC, and whether it's an 18-to-1 to CBD, and it's a very low amount of THC, using the whole plant versus an extract can be much times, it's called the entourage effect, and it's a lot more beneficial sometimes medicinally to have that combination of the whole plant. Do you want to talk a little bit about, excuse me, whole plant medicine?
Yeah, so, so like you said, for me, obviously, when we first started, I had to go through the education process. And, I had first knee surgery I had, I think, was in 2001. And from 2001 to 2009, I used to take anti-inflammatories like Celebrex, Advil every day. Like I would take one in the morning, one at night, whether it was during the season or in the summertime when I was actually training to get ready for the season. And we all know, the potential side effects, and I looked at them, I knew what they were, but, like a lot of us on this panel, especially athletes, this is a way to make a living. So you kind of got to put your body in those positions or in those predicaments and kind of just have to see what happens because you're providing for your family and stuff like that. But once I got introduced to cannabis and I realized I had an all-natural, option, it spun me for a loop because I was just like, how can these professional teams say that they have our best interests at heart, but they don't want to give us something that, that we could take that is without all the, potential side effects of, I always laugh about when we look at these commercials of these new drugs that come online and it's just like, people skipping, to a sunset and everything is just so happy. And then at the end it's like side effects. Instant death, internal bleeding, eyeballs falling out. And you think about with cannabis, we have none of that, and, for me, like I said, it started with my grandmother, then me, and now it's like my whole family, like literally my whole family consumes. My aunt just went through a bout of breast cancer, went through chemo. I gave her Rick Simpson oil that, one of my friends produced for her. She actually gained weight, throughout the process. My grandmother's church, obviously, she's 80-something years old, and all her friends are 80-something years old, so they get knee replacements and hip replacements, and she's always calling me, Al, what can they take? So now my grandma's actually the biggest drug dealer in our church. So that's what she's transitioned to. But medicine woman, right?
She's also the most popular person in our church.
Exactly, but ever since I've learned this, my daughter, literally I just last week started putting my daughter on a CBD regimen. She has ADHD and, watching her personality swings and different things like that and being that, we're giving her a drug that I fully don't even understand. And, when I really think about it, the course that we're setting her on is that she will be taking pills for the rest of her life. So I got to stop that. And I'm going to try to stop it through this plant. And we're going to see what cannabis does. We're going to start, like she said, we're going to start messing with blends and different things like that. And we're going to try to heal her all naturally.
It'll work, too, that'll work for the ADD. I have ADHD, so when I was in college, I was diagnosed. My head coach actually suggested I get tested for it. And that was one of my ways of one of my reasons for medicating was my ADD. It would help me focus and study my plays. Because if I didn't smoke, there was no way I could sit still and actually sit there and study. I would go play the game, go out, and then that was big for my ADD. And I was on medication in the league. I was on Ritalin, so I was dehydrated. My heart rate would go up. During practice, I'd be sweating so much, my hands would be clammy. I'd have to drink Pedialyte. I had all the symptoms, and I would take 30 milligrams twice a day.
Isn't that how it works, though, right? If you take your kid into the doctor and bouncing around too much, ADD, you need to get him Adderall. You take your kid and he's not bouncing around, oh my gosh, he's depressed, we're going to need to put him on some antidepressant. I mean, you can't get out of there without something, it feels like. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. It's sad. I really hate that. I'm trying to naturally teach my family an Eastern philosophy of medicine versus a Western. And all drugs aren't bad. I've talked so much bad stuff about the pharmaceutical industry. I want to say one thing. we're lucky to live in a place where technology, surgery, and even medicine pharmaceutically can keep us alive longer and help us. But it's so goddamn overused. That's the problem, that cannabis can there's a place for opiates. When you're hurt and you're really, really, really hurt, there's a place for it. But really, you can use cannabis to really accentuate and as a complement to those type of pharmaceuticals when you have to take them, thereby reducing the amount of pharmaceuticals that you have to take as well. So interesting. That's a cool story about your daughter. I'm looking into, my daughter's just like me with ADHD, and we're trying to figure out ways to get her to calm down as well.
I'll let you know what I figure out.
Yeah, please do.
Yep.
So, this isn't a new thing. I like to always point out, when I started the 420 games a few years ago, it was like this big, wow, we've never seen anything like this, athletes and marijuana, oh my gosh. But it wasn't, it's like a secret fraternity that we all were in for all these decades, especially these guys, they all knew that inside the locker room that they used weed, but they couldn't talk about it. And I couldn't talk about it because I was an executive, and people could get blacked out at our Christmas parties, but God forbid I lit a joint, I would be an outcast. So I looked back as I started to do this, because I was a closeted cannabis user since I played soccer in high school, and I was the starting pitcher in my baseball team and all that. And I looked, and Pumping Iron, Lou Ferrigno, and Arnold Schwarzenegger in the early 70s, they were smoking weed at the gym when they were competing for Mr. Universe, the most prestigious bodybuilding contest in the world. We've got Phelps, Usain, the fastest in land and water ever. Those were both known cannabis users. Got my man right here, Big Al. And the entire NBA, that's why I fisted Al, is, the NBA represents the most heavy cannabis-using professional sports league, and they're the most incredible athletes that I like to watch more than any of them. So it's just,
and how many seasons was it for you, Al?
17.
That's a lot of seasons to play.
Thank God. I wasn't getting concussions, thank God.
Yeah.
For real.
And still playing, by the way.
6'8".
No, 3-on-3 still.
Well, on that note, I want to ask, starting with Al, and then we can go down the line, or whoever wants to pop in. But to me, a question as a proponent for the pro athletes is, how do we get the professional athletes, the owners of these businesses and these teams, to allow cannabis to be used? And I think we all kind of have seen CBD as our gateway. My statement and my unfortunate reality is that it's only going to be money, and we need to, with data, prove that cannabis can actually be better medicine, with people like Sue and her research to show that this will actually get you on the field and keep you playing longer. And they're not going to really do it just because it makes somebody feel better. So what do you guys think? How are we going to get this legalized to use cannabis in the NFL and beyond?
Well, I think the first thing you said is true. It's going to take money, testing, Sue, you know what I'm saying, to continue to break down these barriers. But what I think, just say NBA guys, right? It's going to take one of the top guys to come out and say he used. And from the NFL, I always say, if Tom Brady did it. But from the NBA, I personally think it's going to happen sooner than later, too, because the league has changed a lot. And the way I say the league has changed a lot.
Let's call LeBron. You got LeBron's number?
Got LeBron. No, not LeBron. But I got somebody close to LeBron that's thinking about doing it. But, these guys are in a different stage in their lives. So when I was coming up, just to say there wasn't as much endorsement money and different things like that. But if there was, you was tied to McDonald's and for $1 million, and that was a lot of money. But now these guys are making $40 million just from their contract. And then they have all these endorsement deals and stuff like that. So I personally think that now they make so much money that they don't care no more. They're like, I'm gonna be exactly who I am now. I don't have to hide who I am. And I personally think that, there will be an NBA player that will make this statement within, I would say, the next 2 years. And then I think that'll just continue to push the conversation forward. And we got to continue to break down barriers. And then we need people like us who are retired athletes to speak our truths. And like you said, come out the weed closet or the green closet. Yeah. And as we continue to do that, we just keep raising awareness, and we'll just keep breaking down barriers.
That is great to hear, Al, and I think you're right. I mean, what a great world we live in now that everybody has a voice, right? I mean, you're seeing this across the board. People can be exactly who they are and not be so worried about it anymore, which is really the ultimate, I don't even know how to say it, but the ultimate responsibility that the cannabis industry has is to build an industry the right way from the beginning. Female empowerment, sustainability, environmentally conscious. I mean, we get to do all this versus every other industry that's trying to reverse engineer themselves right now. So by speaking up, doing things right as we build this, it's not only our responsibility, but it's sort of a luxury. And it's great to hear that you think there's some big people about to say some things. And I think across the board, some big actors are about to do that, some NFL guys. I mean, I think we're going to continue to see the chips fall as long as we get good research back from Dr. Sue that proves it all to be accurate.
Well, my perspective is very much in line with yours. I would say that initially we need education. We need to educate people the same way that you had to educate your grandmother and show her that this isn't something to be afraid of. It's our job as the cannabis community to come together and really take the time to go to your families and to explain to your kids what this is, explain to your parents what this is, explain to your grandparents what this is and how it affects your life. And then when the time comes and when the athletes are ready, it's your guys' job to endorse the right brands that are doing the right thing in this industry, because there are so many bad actors, but there are lots of us with the right heart that really want to get clean products into your family's hands.
Good point.
I think with the NFL, it'll take a little longer, though, because with them, it's more so like the image of the league and the brand, just how you kind of see it is with the stance on the national anthem. As far as like on the lower level, like the coaches themselves, there's coaches I've had personally, they're just like, if you guys are gonna do it, go ahead. Like, we know if you need it, you need it. Like, we're aware of that. Like, we got our tests, our annual test once a year, so it's either in the spring or it's in the training camp. And if you fail that, that's when you're in the program. So once you pass that test, you're good for the year. So they're pretty much, they know, they're fully aware. It's just, they don't want it to be so blatant for it to damage the brand. It's all about the brand. So once it gets like to like a corporate level, like how it is in Canada, like with Canopy, with that level where the same guys that, like Jerry Jones has oil in the money in the oil, he can put it in the marijuana, then they'll be all for it. Because remember, at the end of the day, those guys, the owners, they're businessmen. So the business side of it is really opening their eyes, because a good friend of mine is actually a big corporate owner, and he's friends with a couple owners of the NFL, and they're kind of opening their eyes to the business opportunities of it. They actually put some money into the stocks in Canada and things like that. So they're coming around, but I think the NBA is just always ahead of the NFL in terms of in terms of how they treat the players and how to let the players express themselves and the actual say that the players have.
And baseball and hockey don't even care, do they?
They'll just follow your guys' lead. So I want to know, if you're tested once a year and you get the call, you're clean, you go get tested, how high do you get right after that when you leave the testing facility?
It depends on how long you had to wait. So if you had like in the spring, say it's April, you go to minicamp, mid-April, June. So you stop in like March, so you have like, I don't know, I would usually I would cut it short because I like had my system down. Like, I'd be like, all right, my body fat's here. I'd be like, I need this many days. I got drink 2 gallons of water a day, do my regular workouts, I'll be good in 10 days. So like I would cut it closer than most guys, but a lot of people would do like 30, they would stop then. But I remember like after that, everybody had their tests and everybody would go link up together and everybody just have a good big session. Oh, the test came, and it'd be like a whole seg. They do it by segment a lot of times. So like it'll be the DBs. Sometimes it'll be like, they do something everybody thinks is corny, because most times the guys that don't smoke is the old linemen, for the most part. So it'd be like in the spring, the first test, like everybody would get mad, like, oh, why are you testing the old linemen first? Like, they don't smoke anyway. So it's like
the linemen don't smoke.
Yes, they do it by seg group and things like that. It kind of breaks. Everybody gets split up. Everybody gets done in the spring and then in training camp.
Kickers.
Oh, and the kickers. Yeah. So you need to get them out the way.
They need a ceremony for that. I would have a bowl loaded and just be ready to rock after that test.
That's how it is.
No, interesting stuff. And so, I think it is something important to say again, like, all these guys have lived these lives and it had to wait until now. So I want to quickly mention an organization. Sue's on the board, Al's part of it, Matt's part of it. You're going to be part of it soon, I hope, if you'll honor us. It's called Athletes for Care. We work with retired athletes, not only just to help them understand cannabis, but to help understand how to assimilate back into life after, beyond the glory kind of thing. So when the lights go off and you're not a professional athlete anymore, it's not the most easy thing in the world. financially and a lot of other ways. And so beyond just teaching them cannabis as an alternative to opiates, we've got mentors and then people who are just out of the league. And one of the big things and pillars of that organization, and again, it's not just cannabis, but I want to mention that one of the pillars is cannabis to keep them level and keep them healthy. And it's a great organization you should check out. As we end here, kind of as we wrap this into kind of Q&A, to me, what I've seen happen is a movement of a few guys doing this and then starting to talk, and then a few more ex-guys talking, and then 420 games and other people starting things. There's a social movement out there, and there's thousands and thousands of people that define themselves as athletes that use cannabis, canna athletes, or whatever you want to call it. And that's what your product line is built for, from what I can see, Al. And so I'm very, very thankful to these guys. So before we wrap this up and go into a Q&A, let's give them a huge round of applause for being brave. And they're at the front lines of this movement. It's these guys that are going to help us legalize it. Really is these guys that are going to help move it across the line. From here, I guess, why don't we jump into a little bit of a Q&A? You got a mic? All right. I'll let Susan pick the question asker.
Does anybody have any questions? Come on up here. You guys know the drill by now. No one? No questions this time. Wow, you guys handled it. Come on up here.
This question is for Jim. You mentioned the power plant fitness center. What's the current state of on-site consumption in the regulations now, and when do you think that will be possible, that you will be able to open a gym that you can consume on-site?
I mean, legally, it's possible now. I mean, there's ways to do it call it a cigar room style, where it's separated and ventilated. So, I mean, we were legally able to potentially do what we did. We were unable to open the gym due to some regulatory stuff outside of that, and then the inability to raise. We had a pretty large capital raise and it was right when Trump and Sessions kind of came into office, which kind of killed our raise from some more traditional VCs that we're going to get into the game. But legally, there's a lot of things you got to jump through, but there's ways to do it now if you wanted to do that. So I mean, if you want to open a cannabis gym, give me a call. I'm still trying to do it. Awesome, smoking ice hockey rink. I love that. Well, if there's no questions, the last thing I want to leave.
We got one more.
Oh, good. Hopefully there's a couple more.
Hey, so this question is for Nick. So you mentioned that during training camp and before and over the summer, you stay clean unless you're tested. Did you notice that recovery time from being hit or having some of the concussion-like symptoms was more or less after using cannabis and CBD?
See, I didn't have too much head trauma, so as far as the off season when I had to actually stop smoking, I felt more of the effects of my training, like as far as my recovery and my rest. That's when I felt like I personally, I like smoke on my way to working out. Like I'll smoke a blunt like right before I get there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of gets me in my right mental state. And like I actually feel like I breathe better when I do. I know it sounds weird, but like when I don't smoke, I feel like I can't breathe.
Yeah, I get that too. I have asthma.
Nice.
I had a question. Given the fact that the professional organizations are not accepting abuse, how do current athletes, get educated on the various effects of cannabis and what it can do for them? Is it more just like athletes sharing their personal stories in the locker room, or how did each of you start your journey into researching the effects and what it might do for you?
I guess kind of once I actually got into the program, I looked into it more deeply as far as like once they started making me like listen to them explain all the chemicals and stuff like that. Then I kind of understood like how it actually like helped me when I looked at it from the scientific perspective. But like, hold on a second. I mean, that's a hard one right there actually. It's kind of, you got anything for that, Al?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I'm not an athlete, but I can still tag in on how I learned, which is, I mean, probably by doing the wrong things sometimes, like smoking too much, and then coming back from that. I mean, I'm sure that has to be something that a lot of people still do. There wasn't the wealth of information available that there is like now, and that there has been in the last 2 or 3 years, honestly. I mean, the market has changed so much, and the conversation has really shifted. But I mean, to start, at least myself, I mean, I remember smoking my first bowl, and I was like, well, okay, this is interesting. And then somebody would give me a different, some purple, and I was like, oh, this is not what I just smoked last week. And it's trial and error, and then hopefully learning from your mistakes and also sharing the information with your friends.
Well, in general, education is probably one of the biggest issues in the industry anywhere, and not just for consumers on the street. Even major politicians don't know what is going on. So I think in general, that information is critical. And we've invested in some companies recently. The WebMD of cannabis we think is really good. So I think there's more information tools to come, but just understanding what is happening is probably the most important answer we can give you. I mean, for example, we invest in a lot of insurance companies. I don't know, does anyone have life insurance here? Okay, has anyone tried to get life insurance while you're smoking cannabis and get tested for it? Right, I mean, it used to be life insurance, you would get denied if they found cannabis in your system, and in every other way you were healthy, right? Which is absurd. Now, they penalize you basically somewhere between if you're a tobacco user or an extreme alcohol user, but they'll give it to you. And you think about these insurance companies, the resources they have, and to not be educated enough to know that you're telling me I can't get insurance because if I don't even consume alcohol or tobacco or opioids, but I use a natural product to sleep or my pain, that you're going to penalize me on my life insurance to take care of my family? I mean, there's things that are just crazy. They're getting better. They're starting to get smarter, but it's an institutional thing.
And as far as she said, as far as the trial and error, I think that's definitely a big one. As far as myself, I kind of learned that edibles are another good way I like to kind of medicate before physical activity or like playing the game, because I know it would last longer. So I could eat an edible before the game, it would last me the whole game. Or if I just smoked a blunt, it would only kind of last me kind of like through the first quarter. And then you kind of learn from the older guys too, like when you're first coming in, you're like kind of like, all right, like how do I do this? Like how do I like make sure I can like get high before the game and like I don't get caught, and like I can make sure I get my stuff with me. So you kind of learn from other guys. They teach you how to go about it. And as far as like actually learning what the plant does to you, like now it's getting to the point now where more guys are open to it. So like now it's like I've always been known to the younger guys under me in college and guys I played with. Like I was always a smoker. So the guys that didn't smoke or didn't smoke as much, they're looking to they're hearing more of the medical benefits and they want to know more. So they want to talk to somebody else that actually does it. I get more people coming to me face to face, especially training in Miami where I train at, and with my trainer Bonrito, and then my doctors I go to that do like the stem cell therapy and the Prolo and the nutrient IVs. So it's kind of everybody else all at the same time is trying to gain interest in it. So at the same time, athletes are learning about it, more than medical professionals that look into not the traditional methods of healing like the surgeries and the injections, but more the homeopathic. They're kind of helping us educate as well too, because they're learning at the same time.
I guess this question is more for Eliza. It's really cool to hear your guys' experiences on the professional field, but I'm not an NFL player. I don't know if you could tell. So I was hoping to hear a little bit more about how you suggest we incorporate cannabis into like normal people fitness.
Totally, yeah. I mean, well, so we did ask the question, who consumes cannabis before workout? Can I just see a show of hands who uses it after? Okay, a little bit more than the before, so that's awesome. So there are 3 ways to use cannabis, right? So you can consume it, you can inhale it, or you can apply it. So topicals, in other words. So the first thing is just educating people about those 3 different modes of application and understanding how they can be used. It really depends on the activity. There are certain activities that I personally wouldn't recommend using cannabis beforehand because of just, sometimes things are dangerous. So certain people, when they're lifting super, weights and stuff, I wouldn't recommend high THC because your muscles do get a little bit more relaxed. And I've got somebody laughing over here because obviously he's done it once or twice. But so that's one thing to be aware of. But once again, educating yourself and learning about these products, starting with micro doses. This is something that I teach in my classes all of the time. Microdosing, which means that you're using less than a medicinal dose. So start with 2 to 3 to 5 milligrams and then work your way up from there. Really give your body and yourself a chance to understand how your body interacts with this medicine. And also just understanding that you want to find the least amount necessary to get the desired effect, which is something we don't really see very often in the pharmaceutical industry. It's like, they're like, we want to make sure we eradicate that, so we're going to give you 3 times the normal dose to make sure that you don't need to come back. No. We want to start with, once again, the least amount necessary for that desired effect. You want to allow yourself to find space and to really find that time to focus. With yoga classes, weed is awesome before a good yoga practice or meditation even, and really getting into your body, because when people are on their mats in my classes, it's called bend and blaze. So people, they think that they need to get blazed, and when I say, no, I want you to get lifted. I don't want you to get high. There's a big difference between high and lifted, and I want you to find that in-between space where you feel enlightened as opposed to feeling stoned and like you need to lie down. So there's a few different ways to apply it. I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's important to talk about it. And for anybody who's interested in applying cannabis to their practice or day-to-day activity, please find me later. I'd love to talk to you about what you're doing and how we can enhance it and also solve any issues that you may have in your day-to-day.
I like lifted. I call it activated is kind of our term for it. As we close up, there's something I kind of like to close up on, and I like to bring cannabis into a bigger picture and a bigger discussion and not just talk about it as like to get high. Cannabis is part of our lives, whether you're an athlete or not, to be well and to be happy. I started this off by saying, marijuana used to be a drug and it was bad, but really it's a medicine. Cannabis is a medicine that makes us better people. And we should look at not only cannabis is a plant, everything we put in our body. So food is medicine. And America looks at medicine as what I think of as a drug, which is a white pill. And medicine and drugs or a pill, that's trying to fix something that was bad decisions made over a lot of years. And I think that, if we can use cannabis in a lifestyle of wellness, eating right, thinking about what we put into our body, what kind of cannabis we use, when we use it, how we use it. I just want everybody to think about mindful cannabis use, especially as an athlete, because if you're going to use cannabis and you're going to go out and you're going to go surf in a big wave or do whatever, you want to be on your game and you don't want to get hurt. And same thing in life. So be mindful with your cannabis use. Find out what works for you. It's not the same for everybody. God bless you all. Let's give these guys a big round of applause.
Thanks.